Meanwhile, here in Canada, it's been a weekend of dueling political virtual conventions that are essentially thin fig leaves for the kickoff of some federal election campaign, maybe this spring or in the fall. The NDP will wrap up their convention later today. The Liberal convention ended last night with a sharply worded speech by Prime Minister Trudeau, much of it aimed at criticizing the Conservatives and praising his own government's response to the pandemic. It also gave strong hints that the federal budget of April 19th will pitch a post-pandemic world that includes national childcare, maybe even national pharmacare and other programs. But at what cost? And with the third wave of COVID raging, millions of people are living under severe restrictions right now. Is this the time to consider a federal election? Let's find out. Joining me now is the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, Dominic LeBlanc. Good to have you back on the program. Let me just start with, if I may, a policy issue, because we'll get to the politics in a minute, because the Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, dropped strong hints that there is going to be a national child care program, saying the pandemic's a window of political opportunity. And she said there's been something of an epiphany. But your government hasn't done national child care program like this in 6 years in government. In fact, your government picked a totally different lane, and you went ahead with the tax-free child benefit program. So why now national child care? Why switch lanes?
Well, Evan, I think the Liberal Party has for many years spoken about, thought about, discussed with provinces and territories how we can get to a much better system of early learning and childcare, much more accessible, high-quality system across the country. The pandemic and some of the lockdown measures and other public health measures really laid bare the need for parents to have high quality, accessible childcare as a part of being able to participate in the labor force. It's one social policy that has huge economic growth potential. Look at the economy of Quebec. That's an example for the rest of the country in terms of access to early learning and childcare. So it's something we've talked about. I was a young MP in caucus when Ken Dryden negotiated with all the provinces an agreement that Mr. Harper subsequently canceled. But I think the public and provincial governments, including Conservative provincial governments, are talking to us about how we can collaborate on something as important as that.
Well, it is their jurisdiction, but I'm just trying to figure out, you know, again, 5 years ago, at a cost of what is now about $24 billion a year, you got the Canada Child Benefit. That was the alternative to national child care. So you're saying now, this is the hint, that your government's going to do both. Continue the Canada Child Benefit, which was your child care plan originally at $24 billion a year, and then add something like the Quebec program. What's the cost of all this?
Well, heaven forfend, Evan, that I would disagree with the premise of your question, but I don't think we've ever said that the Canada Child Benefit, which helped middle-class families with the high cost of raising children, was a substitute for an early learning and childcare program. Obviously, one of the challenges around childcare is creating the spaces that families need. Provinces, as you said, have a role to play in doing that. But I think I've always thought that having the two go hand in hand would be ideal, not only for Canadian families, but for the economy. And as I said, provinces are interested in working with us. It is, as you said, properly their jurisdiction, but the Government of Canada wants to spend some money in collaboration with provinces to increase the availability of high quality spaces. That's good for families, but it's also a key part of the economic growth the country will need.
Okay, so there's child care, national child care, so we're looking for that in the budget. The other thing that showed up at the convention potentially was national pharmacare. That's got political significance because the NDP has demanded a national pharmacare in order to support the budget. Is that in the cards now? Did the convention come to a consensus on national pharmacare? Something your government studied but still hasn't done.
Again, the budget is 8 days from now. We'll see ultimately what is in the budget. But when we commissioned, for example, Dr. Hoskin's report on pharmacare, we have the Health Committee has studied, the Health Committee of the House of Commons has studied this. My caucus colleagues, Evan, speak often about some of the regional inequities around the country in terms of provincial drug plans. The high cost of drugs, I think, has shown provinces and Canadians that if we have sort of a central purchasing power, as the Government of Canada taking responsibility to procure some high-cost rare drugs for the whole country, that may offer an advantage to provinces. So this is an ongoing conversation. But again, Premier's Dr. Andrew Furey, who was reelected with a majority government in Newfoundland and Labrador, called me the weekend he was reelected to say he wants to partner with us on national Pharmacare.
Okay, but I mean, eventually, you know, we got $385 billion in deficit, $100 billion more you guys are planning to spend, even though, by the way, the economy just reported 300,000 new jobs and unemployment's falling. So you wonder if you want to keep spending all that money. But let me just, for time purposes, we're in the midst of the pandemic, and it looks like politicians are ready to have an election. First of all, are you concerned that the provinces are not rolling out the vaccines fast enough? 10.5 million vaccines are in the country right now. Millions are still not in people's arms. The math doesn't add up to me. What's going on here?
So Evan, just as we've said always, we're not seeking an election. We're not looking for an election.
You sound like it. To be fair, you sound like you're seeking it. You're spending, and you're basically campaigning at the convention. It's hard to believe that's the fig leaf.
But Evan, at one point, parties have conventions according to their constitution. We had a virtual convention, and when 5,000 Liberals get together, people shouldn't be shocked. It's a partisan discussion. But our government is focused clearly on the vaccines, and on that specific issue, we're very confident that provinces and territories will have an effective, safe rollout of the vaccines. Some of the numbers that you see are a result of lagging information in terms of reporting how many vaccines have actually been administered. So everything General Fortin, the public health agency, tells us is the provinces and territories will have an effective vaccine rollout. Many more millions of vaccines are coming.
But they didn't ask. It's interesting, on the call with you, which you were on with the Prime Minister and the Premiers, that 29th call, no province asked for federal help on the vaccine rollout, which is kind of odd because there's millions of vaccines that haven't been there. There's hesitancy issues, there's barriers issues. Why aren't the provinces seeking help, and is the federal government ready to help if they need it?
The federal government is always ready to help in all of those issues. We've said that since the beginning of the pandemic. I think we've shown that in a number of areas. The provinces tell us they have effective vaccine rollout plans in place. They're ramping up by the hundreds of thousands each week the number of their citizens that can get immunized. I spoke, for example, with Premier Ford late last week. So we're very confident that the provinces and territories that have the responsibility for the delivery of health care, including vaccines, will be able to effectively deliver the millions of vaccines the Government of Canada has procured and will be arriving in the coming weeks.
All right, I got to leave it there. I just want to also give you my condolences and all of our condolences on the loss of Prince Philip, someone your father knew well and somebody you knew well. I know you grew up knowing him, and condolences on the loss of someone that you probably knew your entire life. Minister LeBlanc, thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Evan.